De seguido,
I now am happy to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Gabon to introduce an address by the head of state.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, I have the honor to introduce a statement, pre-recorded statement by His Excellency Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of the Gabonese Republic and Head of State, to the general debate of the 76th session of the UN General Assembly. Mr. President, Your Majesties, heads of state and government, ministers and heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, at the start of my remarks, I would like to extend my warm congratulations to you on your outstanding election to the presidency of this 76th session of the General Assembly. I am delighted by the hope aroused by your vision as well as your perfect knowledge of international affairs. I would also like to extend my congratulations to your predecessor, Mr. Volkan Bozkir, for the remarkable work accomplished in a particularly difficult context. To you, Mr. Secretary General, I reiterate my warm congratulations on your re-election and my full support for your dynamic action throughout your first mandate, as well as my confidence in your future action to find lasting solutions to the many threats and challenges facing our organization. Mr. President, the proposed theme for this session's general debate, Building Resilience Through Hope to Recover from COVID-19, Rebuild Sustainably, Meet the Needs of the Planet, Respect the Rights of People, and Revitalize the United Nations, gives me an opportunity to share our thoughts on the major challenges of the day. As you are aware, the unprecedented health crisis generated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which remains significant, has completely disrupted our societies, our economies, and our coexistence. The development of several vaccines through international collaboration and the ongoing vaccination campaigns in many countries are a beacon of hope for humanity. Vaccination is the only truly effective way to stop the spread of the virus. Mr. President, combining all of our efforts to end the coronavirus pandemic is, in my view, an opportunity to overcome other major crises facing humanity. Indeed, COVID-19 has revealed the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of our economies, as well as those of our health systems, forcing us now to think differently about our development models so as to make them more resilient. Some developed countries already intend to relocate all or part of their strategic productive systems in order to reduce their external dependence. Africa should also be part of this paradigm shift in order to put an end to the crises that hinder its development. This will also require an ability to build basic infrastructure capable of guaranteeing the safety of populations, as well as zero tolerance towards corruption and efficient management of public resources. We will also need to train quality human capital invest significantly and urgently in health infrastructure, and finally, break the vicious cycle of dependence on primary raw materials. Our economies must therefore industrialize to create more wealth by taking full advantage of the aforementioned human capital and our natural resources. To this end, rigorous and transparent debt management, as well as that of resources linked to the export of raw materials, is essential during the transition phase. Finally, we must more than ever accelerate the digital transition and mobilize internal resources by strengthening financial inclusiveness, especially for women. Overall, we need to draw lessons from this pandemic and rebuild our societies in a more sustainable, just, and inclusive manner. I once again call on the leaders of the world to exercise greater multilateralism in order to together build a world economy that takes into account the aspirations of the people who would like to see a more equitable sharing of vaccines and fruits of technological progress. In this pivotal phase and this juncture, it is fundamental that we meet the just imperatives of our universal conscience, including an equitable distribution of technological gains. Otherwise, we risk seeing the cementing of an international order that is a source of human fragility, mistrust between nations, and global insecurity. Mr. President, another issue that calls for solidarity, and one that must be addressed as a priority, is the climate security of our planet. The 26th Conference of the State Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, to be held in Glasgow, Scotland this November, should therefore be an unprecedented moment of action. To recall, its objective is to halve greenhouse gas emissions and preserve biodiversity while promoting investments in green infrastructure in developing countries in order to stimulate and decarbonize their economies. Indeed, the impacts of climate change, including rising sea levels, earthquakes, recurrent forest fires, and others, put our societies and communities under great pressure and compel us to act urgently and collectively. These phenomena interplay with the socioeconomic and political issues in our countries, highlighting risks such as political and economic instability, food insecurity, and large-scale migration, among others. States and communities must now adapt in order to face the challenges of climate change. In addition, without prejudice to mitigation, the international political agenda requires a significant increase in resources dedicated to adaptation to climate change. I remain convinced that no single government can tackle adapting to climate change on its own. International cooperation is therefore essential, in my opinion, to support local action, both as a means of strengthening international security and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. President, the link between climate change and insecurity thus appears to be fairly obvious as far as I'm concerned. As you are aware, Gabon has always been committed to peace and climate security. This commitment will remain unwavering throughout my country's mandate as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the period 2022-2023. While rejoicing in the confidence of the international community, I would like to reiterate my firm willingness to work hard on the process of silencing the guns everywhere and to resolutely place our action in the context of a permanent search for a global consensus promoting the security, dignity, and prosperity of the peoples of the world. Gabon will seize every opportunity to call for an advent of a more just international order marked by a reform of the UN Security Council, which includes both equitable representation within the Council and an improvement of its working methods, in line with the African Common Position expressed by the Azulwini Consensus and the Sirte Declaration. Along with greater international solidarity and the expected reform of the Security Council, the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly and of ECOSOC must also be carried out in order to breathe new momentum into our organization. These reforms are essential as they are able to significantly impact the achievement of several sustainable development goals by 2030, including responding to the legitimate aspirations of the African peoples contained in Agenda 2063. Mr. President, the hope of sustainably rebuilding our governance models and meeting the needs of the planet requires respecting and fulfilling the commitments made. I refer in particular to the transfer of clean technologies and improving access to renewable energies in order to speed up transition to a low-carbon industry that respects the environment. The implementation of these commitments is key to supporting the efforts of countries like Gabon, which has substantially mobilized its domestic resources in the implementation of projects to adapt to climate change and preserve biodiversity. As part of its investment in climate security, Gabon annually sequesters the equivalent of 140 million tons of CO2 while it emits only 35. Thus, with a difference of more than 100 million tons of carbon each year, Gabon's action is decisive for the future of all mankind. The recognition of Ivindo National Park as a World Heritage Site, following the same for Lope Park, affirms the universal and exceptional value of our protected areas. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our partners and friends and all of those who, through their multifaceted support, are accompanying our efforts to conserve and sustainably manage our forests. Mr. President, like many oil-producing countries, Gabon has been hit hard by the impact of the drastic drop in commodity prices. This situation has led to a slowdown in our economic activity. In this context, I instructed the government to set up a transformation acceleration plan. This program aims to revive our economy by accelerating the transition to a post-oil paradigm and emphasizing new engines of growth whose potential could be increased. These include the mining, forestry, and agricultural sectors. In addition, Gabon is strengthening its energy capacity through the upcoming completion of new solar and hydroelectric power plants in order to give new impetus to its industrialization process. Beyond infrastructure development, the intended effect of the implementation of this recovery plan is to ensure fiscal adjustment and promote the private sector as levers for diversification and transformation of our national economy. In the education sector, the government is continuing to mobilize significant resources in order to optimize the education system and bring it into alignment with the demands and the real needs of the labor market. Mr. President, inclusion is another major concern in the policies of my country. This is the thrust of the equal opportunity policy that I have promoted in favor of more equitable development, with particular focus on the empowerment of women and young people, while ensuring that no one be left behind. Regarding the issue of parity, Gabon is one of the countries in Africa where women are the most present and represented in public life. The Prime Minister, the President of the Senate, President of the Constitutional Court, Mayor of Libreville, governors, among others. All of these positions, among the most prestigious in the Republic, are held in my country by women, in whom I reiterate my full confidence. It is my first firm conviction that in a globalized and competitive world, gender parity is a matter of social justice, equality, equity, and efficiency. Indeed, a country must be able to identify its talents and its skills, to leverage them, and to promote them without any gender distinction. Mr. President, development cannot be sustainable without peace and stability. Yet, unfortunately, peace continues to be threatened in many parts of the world. The price of instability caused by terrorism or armed groups is particularly heavy for many African countries, which are forced to devote substantial resources to these phenomena that are sustained, among other things, by the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and wildlife trafficking. A comprehensive, united approach appears essential to me in this fight that we wage against these sources of instability and fragility in a number of regions of Africa. We must realize that any threat against one nation constitutes a threat against all. Mr. President, Gabon remains resolutely engaged within the United Nations, as it has always been, in the promotion of stability and peace on the continental level, in Central Africa, and particularly in the Central African Republic. Security sector reform should be supported in the Central African Republic in order to enable the country to equip itself with national defense and security forces with appropriate human, material, and logistical resources. The goal is to allow for the force's strategic deployment throughout the entire territory of the country in order to restore state authority, ensure the security of people and property, and promote the returns of displaced IDPs and refugees. All this will inevitably contribute to the gradual disengagement of foreign forces operating in the CAR on the basis of bilateral or multilateral agreements. It is also essential to continue operationalizing national institutions in order to contribute significantly to guaranteeing the non-repetition of serious violations of human rights and international humanitarian law in this country. The efforts of the Central African authorities to strengthen social cohesion and the economic recovery of the country should also be supported in order to consolidate gains and guarantee lasting security. To this end, we call on the international community and donors to maintain providing adequate financial support in order to ensure stability and restore hope to the Central African people. Mr. President, building a better world will always be a shifting target as long as a number of peoples remain subject to unfair sanctions. I would therefore like to reiterate a solemn appeal for the total lifting of the embargo, which has been severely affecting the Cuban government and people for several decades. In conclusion, it is my pleasure to reaffirm Gabon's commitment to multilateralism and greater international solidarity, which remain, and I am convinced of this, our most secure assets for building a more resilient organization, one that is able to cope effectively with the challenges and threats facing humanity. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Gabonese Republic for the statement just made.